Kia ora. Ko Mamari te waka, ko te rarawa te iwi, ko te uri o hina te hapu, ko te uri o hina te marae. Kānui te mihi ki tēnā o koutou. Ki ngā āhurei hau, tēnā koutou katoa. My research encompasses political science, education and public theology. Indigeneity is its unifying theme. Responding to James Tully's question, what recourses exist in political theory for thinking about the possibilities of a non-colonial relation between indigenous and non-indigenous peoples, I examine public policy as sites of contest over the nature of indigenous citizenship and belonging, but also as sites of non-colonial possibility. I'm interested in relationships among liberal democracy, citizenship, public sovereignty, and indigenous self-determination in New Zealand and elsewhere. From these perspectives, my original application of a liberal theory of indigeneity to policy questions of health, education, local government, and economic growth is a substantive and systematic attempt to explain liberal democracy's potential for culturally framed indigenous democratic citizenship. Therefore, I think about Te Tiriti o Waitangi not as a bicultural partnership or partnership between races, but as an instrument more broadly concerned with the just distribution of political authority, its distribution among kawanatanga, rangatiratanga, and citizenship. My work on differentiated liberal citizenship focuses on how Māori people may exercise political authority in relation to their own communities and according to their own means, while also participating in the public life of the state with participatory parity. Te Tiriti's first two articles, kawanatanga and rangatiratanga, are well discussed. The third, dealing with citizenship, is not. My work shows how this leads to incomplete understandings of the nature of political power and possibility. Citizenship is the terms of one's belonging to the state, an evolving body of political capacities which determines how people influence the society in which they live. Contemporary New Zealand citizenship developed from the British subjecthood promised in 1840. Its contemporary character and potential is vastly different and continues to evolve. Its terms reflect the values, customs, laws and practices by which a society functions. It is concerned with how people arrange their public institutions and make decisions on matters of public importance. It describes people's obligations to one another and relationships between people and the state. Citizenship reflects human values, making it a cultural concept as much as it is political. Culture influences how people set political priorities and how they form their expectations of what government is for and what it should achieve. It is democratically important that neither culture nor colonialism are barriers to Māori people exercising citizenship as the meaningful political authority found in Aristotle's description of the citizen simply as one who deliberates. As a deliberator, one is a shareholder in the decision-making power of the state. My research inquires into the meanings and effects of this proposition as foundational to a just and non-colonial state. An inclusive state where all, and not just some people, share public authority means that the Crown is not the Pākehā population alone. State institutions, schools, hospitals, universities and departments of state do not belong exclusively to a Pākehā senior tiriti partner. Yet it is true that for some people, the idea that the Crown is also Māori, as Justice Williams put it, is difficult to imagine. Mistrust and the desire to protect rangatiratanga as an independent authority mean that people have good reasons to see the Crown as an adversary. Rangatiratanga is a people's authority over its own affairs, an authority that is not subservient or subject to the control of others. It means that there are spaces of political authority that predate the state and are independent of it. Yet political equality requires that all people have reason to accept that the state belongs to them as much as to anybody else. How then does government function to include all citizens with the same realistic opportunities for influence? How may taking one's position as a shareholder in the authority of the state be a complement but not an alternative to rangatiratanga? A complement to ensure that Māori are present wherever other citizens make decisions. As partner, the opportunity to influence arises only from the outside. Differentiated liberal citizenship is a framework for thinking about how to live together differently, for thinking about how rangatiratanga and state citizenship are complementary and mutually reinforcing sites of political authority. Its purpose is to help determine how to share political authority to improve people's lives, by ensuring, for example, that everyone has the same opportunity to influence decisions about the things that matter to them. Ideally, it becomes unnecessary to frame tiriti relationships as us and them contests. Liberal democracy does not require all power and authority to reside in the same place, nor does it insist that all public institutions make their decisions in the same ways and according to a single set of cultural values. The democratic imperative is to find ways for people to participate in public life with parity of esteem. To this end, critical tiriti analysis is a policy evaluation method I developed with Heather Kame and Tim McCreno to help the political system work out how policy should be made and by whom. It gives effect to differentiated liberal citizenship through a series of questions that should be asked to establish whether a policy instrument or idea is consistent with rangatiratanga and the distinctive citizenship that Te Tiriti affirms, and to establish whether governments may be overreaching their authority vis-a-vis rangatiratanga. Critical tiriti analysis asks, how, for example, will this policy reflect Māori-led decision-making and put Māori leadership, which is a bigger aspiration than partnership, into practice? How will the policy ensure that Māori values, aspirations and tikanga are present as Māori define them and want them to be present? What evidence is there that this policy preserves Māori authority? What do Māori say are the policy problems to address? Could this policy disadvantage Māori people in ways that it does not disadvantage others? Why is the government presuming to make this decision? Why is the decision not, in part or in whole, a matter for rangatiratanga? Questions of this nature and how they might be used to test justice and efficacy in public policy guide my current research. The idea that there is a universal right to self-determination and that it applies to indigenous peoples as much as it applies to anybody else remains contested in New Zealand and elsewhere. The reasons are complex, but there are distinctive contributions that political theory makes to their explanation. Distinctive contributions that it makes to their responses, and most especially, as the subject of my continuing research interests, to the possibilities that exist for a liberal state that extends liberty to all and not just some people. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you very much for that inspiring talk. Does anyone have a question?
David.
A short definition of co-governance and why it's so awful, please.
Well, Kieran McNulty reckons there's a short definition, and Nanaia Mahuta reckons there's not. And the truth lies somewhere in between, I suspect. The problem, though, I think, is not so much with the philosophical framework itself, but with the term. And I think if we could call it something else, we'd be doing well. But the idea that political authority resides in different places, some of it belongs to the sphere of rangatiratanga alone, some of it belongs to the state, And when it belongs to the state, there is, as a matter of justice, a case for Māori voices within that. And when political authority belongs to the state and rangatiratanga in common, then there need to be ways of working out how to manage that. And co-governance with a different name is probably a reasonably fair and sensible approach. But I guess we're dealing here with the intersection of the philosophical and the political, and the two often struggle together. And there's a long answer.
Other questions? Oh, come on, you lot. I have a question that may be a bit off the speech itself and the work that you've been doing. But as one of our distinguished honorary fellows, I wonder if the transferability in some of the issues in Australia, for example, in indigenous politics, have direct analogies to some of the work that you've been doing here.
Yeah, well, my work is comparative. One of the reasons I moved to Australia was to strengthen the comparative dimension. But the Australian context is vastly different. The indigenous population is a much smaller proportion of the whole. Its linguistic and cultural diversity is enormous. So political cohesion in the interests of resistance to colonial power is that much more difficult. But there is a referendum to be held later this year to alter the constitution to establish a First Nations voice to Parliament and the executive of government. And interestingly, some people who are opposed to that are misinterpreting the workings of the Waitangi Tribunal here to try to discredit the claim in Australia for a voice. Suggestions going around some of the media that the Waitangi Tribunal has a veto over Parliament, and that's what the voice in Australia is going to have, because apparently the voice is modelled on the Waitangi Tribunal. And it is a worrying feature of the contemporary debate. It has descended to that level, because the no case is really struggling with an authentic democratic argument that really is not appealing to a racist voice, and that seems to be the target of the no campaigners at the moment. So I guess we could share common experiences of incivility in these sorts of debates, and perhaps share ways of resolving those. But beyond that, the circumstances are very, very different. Although the idea of indigeneity as a political category, a political status that's quite different to ethnic minority politics, is transferable across many jurisdictions.